Mr. Governor Bergen, thanks for doing the job, man. We appreciate it. Both come from oil and gas producing states. One of my top priorities has been to use federal, state revenue sharing on oil and gas lands to help rebuild Louisiana's coastline. During the time of this hearing, we will have lost several football fields worth of Louisiana coastline, which of course makes us more vulnerable to a hurricane hitting our coast. And last Congress, I'm pleased to say that the RISE Act, which did that, passed by voice vote out of this committee. So I'm hoping we do that again. Can you briefly speak to the importance of revenue sharing to North Dakota, knowing that on federal lands in North Dakota, there's revenue that comes back to help mitigate whatever negative impact that drilling may have?
Well, yes, absolutely. And the federal revenue goes two ways. I mean, at least we've got it coming back, a portion of it back to the state, but then a portion of it goes back to the federal Treasury. And the federal Treasury, as we know, we've talked earlier about the debt that we have. Responsible, sustainable, smart development, whether it's onshore or offshore, is of great benefit to conservation, in your case, coastline, but it also can help pay for other things. In our state, the revenues that are coming in are helping pay for education, healthcare, roads. It touches every...
If you will, it's kind of a middle class, if you will, and lower economic class benefit program, because those things are touching services directly, aside from the jobs being created, directly impacting the quality of their life.
Absolutely, and then when done effectively and appropriately, it also lowers the burden of sales tax and property tax and income tax on those same hardworking individuals.
It's music to my ears. I will say, when I speak to the folks that actually do these big developments, one fellow said, you know, it used to be when they had a lease sale, I could plan a fishing trip with my son at the same time because it was so regular. It was going to be on this day at this time, happened to be in New Orleans, so they had a great meal. I wanted to say that now there's been dilatory practices that have been instituted, not for the sake of anything other than dilatory and to increase the cost of development and to hopefully thwart that development. Can I get a commitment from you, as much as you can possibly do it, that when we have lease sales now, they will be as they are scheduled to have lease sales, and so the people making these decisions will have certainty as to them?
As someone who is participating in a lawsuit suing the federal government to try to get them to hold the lease sales when they were supposed to be held by law, you can count that as head of Interior, we will be following the law when it comes to lease sale time.
And I think the operative statement is you'll be following the law, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
Now, on that, we know that on some federal lands, from before modern environmental standards, there are abandoned oil and gas wells, and those tend to leak methane, for example. I'm very interested in working on a bipartisan basis, bicameral basis, of how we can actually have a federal program which sustainably is paying to cap these abandoned oil and gas wells. And Louisiana has about 1,500 of them. Any thoughts about that? Because I'm sure in North Dakota that you had to address this issue too.
Well, in North Dakota, we took part of the revenues that were coming into the state from the oil and gas tax revenues, and we created a abandoned well reclamation fund, and that's been replenished, and then that goes back in to do that. But we've also made sure that the private sector is doing their share.
Now, let me ask, because one thing I hear from the private sector is the issue of liability protection. Will they be sued the bejesus out of if something goes bad about this remediation of the abandoned oil and gas well? And I ask this, I don't know the answer to it. We're trying to explore that. There is the abandoned mine provisions that we're looking at. How did y'all manage that in North Dakota?
Well, we always were looking for incentives to make sure that the private sector was willing to participate as opposed to afraid to participate. And you're describing this thing where if you get unlimited liability, then they want to run the other way and lawyer up and do that, as opposed to, hey, if you got the appropriate bond levels that are economic, they pay those up front. We exhaust those. If they've got other payments that they need to do, we've just been able to work collaboratively in a way to make sure that the private sector is doing their share when we're doing this. And part of that, their shares, because we're taking if they weren't investing in creating the well, putting in the people, doing the development, taking the risk on the front end, we wouldn't have the revenue to split up on the back end.
So we're going to look at what y'all did in North Dakota as we draft our legislation. One more thing, knowing that you'll be in charge of this, as I gather, this kind of how do we do energy sort of thing. One thing that I've been concerned about is that countries like China do not enforce international standards on controlling pollution. That lowers their cost of manufacturing as much as 20%, incentivizing manufacturers to leave our country and move there. But then we get the loss of the jobs, but also all the air pollution that then blows over to our West Coast. I think I read 20% of the SOx in California is related to emissions from China. Now, one thing I've been proposing, Senator Graham is my co-sponsor, is a foreign pollution fee that would put a fee on certain products from a country like China roughly equal to their avoided cost of not complying with environmental regulations. As the president speaks about tariffs, this would be a tariff that would be thoroughly defensible as we address something the economists call externalities. I slept in a Holiday Inn last night, I know that word. So I go through that knowing that you and your position will be making sure that our industry is competitive in terms of controlling our emissions in accordance with the law, which then gives us that advantage relative to those competitors arbitraging those rules. Any quick comment on that? Because the chair is being generous and allowing me out a little extra time.
Well, I think you're spot on to recognize President Trump, who has a willingness to use tariffs. His principle is reciprocity. If you have access to our markets, and we don't have access to yours, or if you're using unfair practices, if you're dumping in here, in this case, if they're not doing reclamation, they're using child labor, they're doing all the things that lower their cost, that's exactly the kind of place that he has publicly spoken about, that he would want to have reciprocity with tariffs.
Thank you very much.
You know, before I ever entered politics, before I was ever thinking about running for office, I practiced medicine for 30 years. I worked in public hospitals in California, Louisiana, specializing in liver disease, caring for those who otherwise would not have had a specialist. If you will, dedicating my life to saving lives. That is, being a doctor. That ethic guides me now. In my opening statement, I told the story of my patient, an 18-year-old girl with acute liver failure from hepatitis B, being air ambulanced to LSU Shreveport Hospital for a liver transplant. Now, let me finish the story. Her mother wasn't allowed to fly in the helicopter, so her mother drove the 3 hours from Baton Rouge to Shreveport. Now, when she arrived, they let her visit her daughter before she went back to the OR. And the mom goes in to say a prayer, squeezes the daughter's hand. The daughter's eyes open, and she said, "Mama?" And the daughter began to recover. Powerful story with a happy ending. But as a doctor, I saw endings not so happy. I just had a friend text me, 2 children died in an intensive care unit in a Baton Rouge hospital from vaccine-preventable diseases this past month. So my concern is that if there's any false note, any undermining of a mama's trust in vaccines, another person will die from a vaccine-preventable disease. Now, you've got a megaphone. Maybe you and Bernie, you know, Bobby and Bernie. Of everybody in this room, the 2 of you have the biggest followings, tremendous credibility. And with that influence comes a great responsibility. Now, my responsibility is to learn, try and determine if you can be trusted to support the best public health. A worthy movement called MAHA to improve the health of Americans, or to undermine it, always asking for more evidence and never accepting the evidence that is there. I looked at the article from Dr. Mawson, and it seems to have some issues. I'll just put that to the side. And that is why I've been struggling with your nomination. There are issues ultra-processed food, obesity, we are simpatico. We're completely aligned. And as someone who has discussed immunizations with thousands of people, I understand that mothers want reassurance that the vaccine their child is receiving is necessary, safe, and effective. We agree on that point, the two of us, but we've approached it differently. And I think I can say that I've approached it using the preponderance of evidence to reassure, and you have approached using selected evidence to cast doubt. Now, put differently, we're about the same age. Does a 70-year-old man, 71-year-old man who has spent decades criticizing vaccines and who's financially vested in finding fault with vaccines, can he change his attitudes and approach now that he'll have the most important position influencing vaccine policy in the United States? Will you continue what you have been, or will you overturn a new leaf at age 70? I recognize, man, if you come out unequivocally, vaccines are safe, it does not cause autism, that would have an incredible impact. That's your power. So what's it going to be? Will it be using the credibility to support lots of articles, or will it be using credibility to undermine? And I got to figure that out for my vote. You have the power to help rebuild, to help public health institutions re-earn the trust of the American people. Now, let's be political. I'm a Republican. I represent the amazing state of Louisiana. And as a patriotic American, I want President Trump's policies to succeed in making America and Americans more secure, more prosperous, healthier. But if there's someone that is not vaccinated because of policies or attitudes you bring to the department, and there's another 18-year-old who dies of a vaccine-preventable disease, helicoptered away, God forbid dies, it'll be blown up in the press. The greatest tragedy will be her death, but I can also tell you an associated tragedy that will cast a shadow over President Trump's legacy, which I want to be the absolute best legacy it can be. So that's my dilemma, man. And you may be hearing from me over the weekend. You may be hearing from me over the weekend. I once again thank you for your time, and I yield to my ranking member. That said, at the end, taking the ranking member and the chairman's privilege, we will have a chance, the two of us will have a chance to ask a little bit more, and that's what you get for being a chair. So that said, let's begin. Bobby, if I may, because you said I could, you had once described yourself as pro-vaccine to me. Now, the context of what I'm about to ask is that there's multiple studies establishing the safety of measles and hepatitis B vaccine, and specifically that they are not a cause of autism. In this position, and you have previously said yes, but if you are approved to this decision, to this position, will you say unequivocally, will you reassure mothers unequivocally and without qualification that the measles and hepatitis B vaccines do not cause autism?
Senator, I am not going into the agency with any.
Well, that's kind of a yes or no question, because if you're, because the data is there, and that's kind of a yes or no. And I don't mean to cut you off, but that really is a yes or no.
If the data is there, I will absolutely do that.
Now there is the data. Just because I used to do hepatitis B, as I've said, I know the data is there.
Well, then I will be the first person. If you show me data, I will be the first person to assure the American people that they need to take those vaccines.
Now, what concerns me is that you've cast doubt on some of these vaccines recently. I mean, like the last few years, but the data, and I can quote some of it. The data has been there for a long time. I've been out of the game. I've been in Congress for 16 years. And this data was in large measure generated before I came to Congress. So my concern is that if you were making those claims and being so influential, I mean, your bully pulpit is incredible. With that responsibility, that you never acquainted yourself with anything that might contradict that what you were previously saying. So let me ask once more. If the data is brought to you, and these studies that have been out there for quite some time and have been peer-reviewed, and it shows that these two vaccines are not associated with autism, will you ask, no, I need even more? Or will you say, no, I see this, it's stood the test of time, and I unequivocally and without qualification say that this does not cause autism?
Not only will I do that, but I will apologize for any statements that misled people otherwise.
Thank you. Next,
And I just want to pledge to you that I will never stick on a point if somebody shows me data that says I'm wrong. I know that's an interpretation people have, but it's absolutely wrong. I am science-driven and evidence-driven.
I think the concern is how persuadable people are. But let me go on because I have limited time. I'm going to hold myself to the same 5 minutes. Yesterday, Senator Bennett in Finance asked you if you had once previously made statements that Lyme disease was created as a military bioweapon, and you said you may have said that once. Do you still believe that Lyme disease was created as a military bioweapon?
I've never believed that, Senator. What I said is that that we should always follow the evidence. There were 3 books suggesting that. I have not read them through. What I've said is we should always follow evidence, no matter what it says. So I never have said that definitively Lyme disease was created in a biolab.
Okay. Next, again, this will be kind of a yes or no. Do you commit that you will revise any CDC recommendations only based on peer review, consensus-based, widely accepted science? In other words, not personal beliefs or the beliefs of any single person that you or your department may identify?
Absolutely, Senator. I am not going to go into HHS and impose my preordained opinions on anybody at HHS. I'm going to empower the scientists at HHS to do their job and make sure that we have good science that's evidence-based, that's replicatable, where the raw data is published.
I'm almost out of time, so let me get to another question.
All right.
Do you promise that FDA will not deprioritize or delay review and/or approval of new vaccines, and that vaccine review standards will not change from historical norms?
Well, we will have the best vaccine standards with safety studies, and I will not, if the
That's a little bit of a different answer than the question I asked, because what is the best could be in the eyes of the beholder. So let me read again. Promise that the FDA will not deprioritize or delay review and/or approval of new vaccines, and that vaccine review standards will not change from historical norms.
Yes.
Great. With that, I will set a good example, and I yield my time to... President, I'd like to make a statement regarding my vote in committee to, on behalf of Robert F. Kennedy, to be the Secretary of HHS. First, I thank everyone who has contacted me over the last few days. Almost all have been respectful and seek the best for our country. And I've been contacted by text, by phone, by email. And if I didn't respond to anyone, it was not to be rude. It's just I was getting hundreds of messages a day personally and thousands through the office. And I just physically could not. Now, Mr. President, believe it or not, of these hundreds of people calling me and contacting me, however they did, many of them disagreed with each other, diametrically. 3-dimensionally, they disagreed. But the unifying factor is that they all desire the best for our country, even though they differ from each other so much. And maybe that kind of frames my feelings about this nomination. For context, before entering politics, before ever thinking about running for political office, I practiced medicine for 30 years in a public hospital for the uninsured, caring for those who otherwise would not have been able to afford the access to the care that I provided. After seeing patients die from vaccine-preventable diseases, I dedicated much of my time to vaccine research and immunization programs, personally witnessing the safety monitoring and the effectiveness of immunization. Put simply, vaccines save lives. This is the context that informed me when considering RFK as the nominee to be Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. It was a decision I studied exhaustively, I took very seriously. And as I said I would, I spoke with Mr. Kennedy not once, but multiple times over the weekend, including this morning. We had in-depth conversations about the medical literature, about the science behind the safety of vaccines. He referred me to studies and to people. I reviewed them and spoke to those whom he mentioned I should speak to. Now, the most notable opponents of Mr. Kennedy were pediatricians on the front lines of our children's health who regularly have to combat misinformation, combating vaccine skepticism with correct information that comes from their education, their training, and experience as physicians. They are aware of the falling vaccine rates and the inevitability of increasing hospitalizations and deaths of children from vaccine-preventable diseases. They are aware that children are now contracting diseases that they would not have contracted if the child was vaccinated. Now, I heard from others impassioned about the need to address chemicals in our food and a belief that we are victims of large impersonal forces maximizing profits while sacrificing our health. And there is evidence for that. Although food safety is principally a USDA concern, I strongly agree that this is an issue society must address. Other RFK supporters are concerned regarding environmental risk. They fear these risks are being ignored by authorities. Mr. Kennedy's history of environmental activism motivates their support. I pointed out that the Environmental Protection Agency monitors this, not the Department of Health and Human Services, but they still feel that he can make a difference. So as I looked how to resolve this, I returned to where I began. Would it be possible to have Mr. Kennedy collaborate in helping public health agencies re-earn the trust of the American people? Now, regarding vaccines, Mr. Kennedy has been insistent that he just wants good science and to ensure safety. But on this topic, the science is good. The science is credible. Vaccines save lives. They are safe. They do not cause autism. There are multiple studies that show this. They are a crucial part of our nation's public health response. But as someone who's discussed immunizations with thousands of people, I do recognize that many mothers need reassurance that the vaccine their child is receiving is necessary, effective, and most of all, safe. While I'm aligned with Mr. Kennedy as regards ultra-processed food, reforming NIH, and taking on chronic disease, once more, it leaves vaccines. Now, Mr. Kennedy and the administration reached out seeking to reassure me regarding their commitment to protecting the public health benefit of vaccination. To this end, Mr. Kennedy and the administration committed that he and I would have an unprecedentedly close collaborative working relationship if he is confirmed. We will meet or speak multiple times a month. This collaboration will allow us to work well together and therefore to be more effective. Mr. Kennedy has asked for my input into hiring decisions at HHS beyond Senate-confirmed positions, and this aspect of the collaboration will allow us to represent all sides of those folks who are contacting me over this past weekend. He has also committed that he would work within current vaccine approval and safety monitoring systems and not establish parallel systems. If confirmed, he will maintain the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices recommendations without changes. CDC will not remove statements on their website pointing out that vaccines do not cause autism. Mr. Kennedy and the administration also committed that this administration will not use the subversive techniques used under the Biden administration, like sue and settle, to change policies enacted by Congress without first going through Congress. Mr. Kennedy and the administration committed to a strong role of Congress. Aside from he and I meeting regularly, he will come before the Help Committee on a quarterly basis if requested. He committed that the Help Committee chair, whether it's me or someone else, may choose a representative on any board or commission formed to review vaccine safety. If he is confirmed, HHS will provide a 30-day notice to the Help Committee if the agency seeks to make changes to any of our federal vaccine safety monitoring programs, and Help Committee will have the option to call a hearing to further review. These commitments and my expectation that we can have a great working relationship to make America healthy again is the basis of my support. He will be the secretary, but I believe he will also be a partner in working for this end. If Mr. Kennedy is confirmed, I will use my authority as chairman of the Senate Committee with oversight of HHS to rebuff any attempt to remove the public's access to life-saving vaccines without ironclad, causational, scientific evidence that can be accepted and defended before the mainstream scientific community and before Congress. I will watch carefully for any effort to wrongfully sow public fear about vaccines between confusing references of coincidence and anecdote. But my support is built on assurances that this will not have to be a concern, and that he and I can work together to build an agenda to make America healthy again. We need a leader at HHS who will guide President Trump's agenda to make America healthy again. Based on Mr. Kennedy's assurances on vaccines and his platform to positively influence Americans' health, it is my consideration that he will get this done. As I've said, it's been a long, intense process, but I've assessed it as I would assess a patient as a physician. Ultimately, restoring trust in our public health institution is too important, and I think Mr. Kennedy can help get that done. As chairman of the Senate Committee with oversight authority of his position, I will do my best to make sure that that is what we accomplish. I want Mr. Kennedy to succeed in making America healthy again. His success will be tied to the health of our nation. He has the opportunity to address the most pertinent issues affecting Americans' health. We also need to reform institutions like FDA and NIH, and those, as already been indicated, are my priorities as chairman of the Health Committee. I look forward to his support in accomplishing this. If confirmed, I look forward to working together with Mr. Kennedy to achieve President Trump's mission of improving the health of all Americans. And with that, I yield.
Senator from Vermont.
Mr. President, I ask that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I know that my Republican colleagues like to do what the President asks them to do. They agree with him on virtually everything. So today I'm going to make life easy for my Republican colleagues. I am going to ask them to support legislation, extremely important legislation, that in fact does what President Trump claims that he wants to do. Mr. President, on May 20th, just a few days ago, President Trump said the following: I am cutting, quote, not only that, remember, I am cutting drug prices by 85%. This is what President Trump said a few days ago. I am cutting drug prices by 85%. Right now, I'm saving the whole thing because I did something nobody was willing to do. Other countries pay a tiny fraction of what we do, and I instituted favored nations. We're now going to pay the lowest in the world. We will be the equivalent of the lowest country in the world. People go to London, they go to Canada, they go to other countries, many other countries, because they want to buy their pharmaceutical products, their drugs, at a fraction of the cost. We are going to have the lowest cost of anywhere in the world. No one else could do that but me. End of quote. That's President Trump a few days ago. Well, I don't usually agree with President Trump on anything, but in fact, on this issue, he makes a very strong point. In the United States today, we have a healthcare system that is broken, it's dysfunctional, and it is cruel. It is a system which spends twice as much per capita on healthcare as any other major country, while 85 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured. And 1 out of 4 Americans today cannot afford the cost of the drugs their doctors prescribe, and it is a system where over 60,000 people a year die because they don't get to a doctor on time. While the current system makes huge profits for the large drug companies, huge profits for the insurance companies, it is obviously failing the needs of ordinary Americans. So what is the United States Congress doing to address this crisis? Well, right now, sadly and tragically, the Republicans are trying to ram through a so-called reconciliation bill which would deny coverage, take away coverage for up to 13.7 million Americans, according to the Congressional Budget Office. In other words, in the midst of a terrible health care crisis, this legislation makes a very bad situation much worse. We cannot allow that to happen. So what should we do? Well, in my view, health care is a human right. We should do what every other major country on earth does and guarantee health care to all people. But today, I want to get back to what President Trump said a few days ago. And what he said is that the American people are sick and tired of paying by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, and he is right. Whether you are a Democrat or Republican or an independent or progressive or conservative, you understand that there is something wrong when Americans can't afford the high cost of prescription drugs and the drug companies make over $100 billion a year in profits. Let me give you just a few examples of the current situation regarding prescription drug costs in America. While it costs just $5 to manufacture Ozempic, that is a widely used drug right now, Novo Nordisk, the manufacturer of Ozempic, makes obscene profits by selling this drug for more than $1,000 in the United States. That drug cost $76 in France, $85 in Germany, and $170 in Canada. But it's not just Ozempic. Prescription drug after prescription drug costs far more in this country to purchase than in other countries, in some cases 10 times more. So what are we going to do about it? Well, I think it might be a good idea for my Republican friends to listen to what the President of the United States said. And today we are going to offer my Republican friends the opportunity to achieve the goals that President Trump has talked about. The problem with President Trump's initiative is that he is mostly just talking. The executive order that he has introduced and signed does not do what he says he wants to do. Just don't take my word for it. An expert at Harvard University was recently quoted as saying, quote, "The executive order reads more like an aspirational statement than a serious attempt to initiate a policy change," end of quote. The Wall Street Journal, no great friend of mine, their analyst said the order was, quote, "more bark than bite." Since issuing the executive order, President Trump has gone on Fox News, and while talking about differences in American prices and international prices, he said, quote, "He ended it. Good news. It's all over. He ended it. We no longer pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs," according to President Trump. During that same interview, he said, quote, "The drug companies were great," end of quote. The drug companies apparently even told him, "Look, it is time," end quote. Just yesterday at a press conference with Speaker Johnson, he claimed he is, quote, "cutting drug prices by 80 to 85% because he stopped the scam." Well, there you go. Good news, America. President said it, must be true, because he would not lie. Drug prices are down by 80, 85%. Anyone really believe that? Nobody does. If we want to, on the other hand, do more than just talk, we got to do something, and the way we do it is with some serious legislation. And that is the legislation that I have introduced today. If we want to actually lower the outrageously high cost of prescription drugs in America, we need to take on the pharmaceutical industry in a way that President Trump has never even thought about doing. In other words, we need less talk, we need more action. And that is why I've introduced legislation to make sure that Americans pay no more than people in other countries for the exact same prescription drug. Unlike President Trump's executive order, my bill doesn't just ask drug companies nicely, please, to lower prices. My legislation makes it clear that drug companies must lower prices for Americans to those they charge people in other countries. In other words, what we are finally saying is, if you're charging the people in the UK $100 for this prescription drugs, that's what you're going to charge the people in the United States, not 10 times more. And the difference between my legislation and Trump's so-called executive order is that if the pharmaceutical industry refuses to do the right thing and substantially lower drugs, my bill will allow other companies to sell the same prescription drugs at a far lower cost. In other words, generics can come onto the market and sell the drug for a fraction of the price. So, President Trump says he supports making sure Americans pay no more than people in other countries for prescription drugs. President Trump says campaign, quote, campaign contributions can do wonders, but not with me and not with the Republican Party. We are going to do the right thing, something that the Democrats have fought for many years, end of quote. Well, I am just ever so delighted that campaign contributions have no impact on the Republican Party. Could have shocked me, but there we go. President Trump said it. It must be right. So, bottom line here. President Trump says he wants to lower the cost of prescription drugs in America by 80 to 85%. I agree. President Trump has issued an executive order which he says will do that. It will not do that. Legislation that I have introduced has real teeth, and it will do that. So I today call upon all of my colleagues, especially my Republican colleagues, to support this legislation, because I know President Trump has said that the huge amount of money that the pharmaceutical industry gives in campaign contributions to Democrats and Republicans doesn't have any impact on the Republicans. They are prepared to stand up to the drug companies. So that is great news. Delighted to hear that. So, Mr. President, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions be discharged from further consideration of S. 1818, and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. Further, that the bill be read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table.
Is there an objection?
Reserving the right to object.
The senator from Louisiana.
I appreciate the ranking member's interest in addressing drug prices. And we absolutely have to lower the cost of prescription drugs. And we absolutely have to acknowledge that there is a tension. If we do not incentivize the development of new types of drugs, we condemn ourselves to continue to die from diseases for which there are currently no cures. And I say this as a guy that has practiced medicine or graduated from med school in 1983, let me put it that way. When I graduated from medical school, Mr. President,
One of the most common surgeries was taking out a portion of somebody's stomach. I don't mean your belly, I mean your stomach, where the food goes after you swallow it. This is how I talk to medical students. Because of peptic ulcer disease. And there came along a medicine called cimetidine. It just changed the landscape. And we went from a surgery being most common to one which was rarely performed in 6 months. Cimetidine, which is now called Tagamet, which is now sold over the counter. Just a measure of the innovation, which if we had not had that innovation then, a most common surgery would still be removing a portion of somebody's stomach because of bleeding ulcers. More tragically, or it's pretty tragic if you lose part of your stomach, when I was a resident in Los Angeles, is when the HIV epidemic came out. And all these men, they're all men, 20 to 30, came in with something we didn't even know what the disease, didn't have a way to diagnose it, so we called it the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. And they all died. They all died. And I remember saying to one of the older physicians, why do we even bother treating them? Because they all die. But because there was an incentive for companies to come up with cures, they did, and they stopped dying, and they began living. That doesn't happen accidentally. It happens because there's incentive to bring a drug through expensive studies to the market. By the way, I recently had a doc tell me who treats HIV positives that if the patient takes their medicine, they die when they're 88 of Alzheimer's or a stroke or something else, but they should not die from an AIDS-related cancer. That is the power of innovation, and that is the power of incentivizing innovation. I could go down a list of other drugs. Melanoma. When I was in med school, if you got diagnosed with melanoma, they said, go fill out your will. Now I have friends who have been living for 8 years, 10 years longer, taking immunotherapy for melanoma. That doesn't just happen. That happens because you incentivize innovation. So what are our diseases now for which we have no cure? Alzheimer's. I lost 2 parents to it. Wouldn't it be great if we had a cure for Alzheimer's? Pancreatic cancer, esophageal cancer. I can just go down the list of things for which there is no cure, but I can tell you with the appropriate incentive, with research taking place, in 10 years, we will speak of those diseases as diseases of the past, as we now speak of bleeding peptic ulcer disease causing a portion of your stomach to be resected as something in the distant past. Now, by the way, I applaud my colleague, I applaud President Trump for saying that other countries are not carrying their fair share of the load for paying for this innovation. They should do it too. This is not the way to get there, but it's absolutely essential that they do, and my staff is bringing something which I will invite my colleague from Vermont to join us on that, because it's absolutely essential that we have the innovation, that we be able to afford it, and the only way we balance those two is if other countries pay their fair share. But let's return to the measure at hand. The measure at hand sounds simple. It is simple. It won't succeed. Oh, it'll succeed in lowering prices temporarily, but in the long term, it will defeat the ability to incentivize new innovation. And then all drugs will be cheap because all drugs will be old. But we need new drugs, and we need the incentive, and this kills that incentive. So, for that, I object.
Question is heard. The senator from Vermont.
I want to thank my colleague from Louisiana, the chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, Pension Committee on which I serve, for his remarks. And I think nobody will disagree with him that we have seen in recent years incredible innovation, and there are drugs now on the market that are saving lives that 20, 30 years ago, 10 years ago were not the case. And we want to continue that innovation. No debate about that. But all that I'm asking my colleague from Louisiana to focus on is what President Trump said, not last year, not 5 years ago, it's what he said yesterday. And what he said yesterday, and I quote Senator Cassidy, this is President Trump, quote, "I'm cutting drug prices by 85%. Right now, I'm saving the whole thing because I did something nobody was willing to do. Other countries pay a tiny fraction what we do, and I instituted favored nations. We're now gonna pay the lowest in the world. We will be the equivalent of the lowest country in the world. People go to London, they go to Canada, they go to other countries, many other countries, but we're going to do it here in the United States, end quote. That's what he said. So all that I am doing, Chairman Cassidy, is putting into legislative effective language what the President of the United States said. And by the way, he said, again, that the pharmaceutical industry and all of their campaign contributions have no impact on Republicans, only on Democrats. Well, maybe that's the case, but I doubt that very much. So all that I'm asking my colleague and friend, the chairman of the committee, to do is to put in place what President Trump said he was doing. And what my legislation would do is exactly what Trump talked about. It would lower the cost of prescription drugs to what other countries are paying. That's what it does. Does what Trump said he wants to do. I would urge my friend from Louisiana to reconsider. Okay, with that,
I recognize the senator from Oregon.
Mr. President, when I was in grade school, my dad, the mechanic, would point to the schoolhouse doors and say, son, if you go through those doors and you work hard, you can do almost anything because we're so fortunate to live here in the United States. He was a big fan of public schools, giving an opportunity for every child to thrive. And I took his advice to heart and went through those doors and studied hard and loved the vision of opportunity for every child in America. But the fact is that many careers require more than K-12 education. And the cost of college has exploded. When I was graduating from high school, if you worked a summer job at minimum wage, which was about $3 an hour, you could save enough money living at home to pay your tuition at any of the public universities in the state of Oregon. Well, try paying your tuition today. A year of tuition based on minimum wage working the summer. We are in a situation where college is so much more important now than it was decades ago to so many parts of opportunity in our society, and yet it's so much more expensive. It's a huge barrier for opportunity for every child. Not so long ago, my children are 29, 27, not so long ago, they were in grade school in my neighborhood, my blue-collar neighborhood, and folks would say to me, Jeff, I'm not sure I should encourage my son or my daughter to go to college because I'm afraid they're going to end up with a mountain of debt. And that debt's going to be a millstone around their neck. Instead of creating opportunity, obstructing opportunity. And indeed, we've seen the challenge in which, because of the cost of college, our sons and daughters are marrying later. Because of debt from college, our sons and daughters are finding it much more difficult to be able to buy a home, which have been the primary source of family wealth for middle-class Americans. So we should do something about this. But unfortunately, my Republican colleagues want to make college more expensive. I wish you could come to my blue-collar community, get out of your gated communities where you live with people affluent enough to just pay their sons and daughters' education, and understand how expensive college is as a barrier to opportunity here in the United States of America. Specifically, they want to make it harder for children to afford college by eliminating income-driven repayment plans for borrowers. Income-driven repayment plans help folks responsibly pay off their student loans by basing a borrower's monthly payments on their income and their family size. Sounds like common sense to me. One of these income-driven repayment plans is the Saving on a Valuable Education, or SAVE plan, which more than 8 million Americans are enrolled in. But in the reconciliation bill, the proposed bill that we will be voting on later this week, it's slashed. And Senate Help Committee Republicans are attempting to slash these loans in their portion of the reconciliation bill as well. As a result of these cuts, the Student Borrower Protection Center calculates that the typical borrower with a college degree will pay about $250 more per month. Now, if you're coming from affluence, you're like $250 a month, less than 10 bucks a day, not a problem. But you know, it is a massive problem for children across America, our young adults across America, for our families who are not among those millionaires and billionaires that so often inhabit this Senate chamber. Why do Republicans want to get rid of programs that help individuals and working families, help lift them up and responsibly pay back what they owe, and instead want working families to believe that perhaps college is not a possibility because of the mountain of debt it will create on their children? It's a families lose, billionaires win. This attack on affordable ways to pay for college. It's another example of the big, beautiful betrayal in which this reconciliation bill puts families down and helps the rich get richer. Families lose, billionaires win. That's not a good theme for America. It's not good policy, not even good politics. How about we work together on families thrive and billionaires pay their fair share? I've introduced the Savings Opportunity and Affordable Repayment Act, or the SOAR Act, with Senator Kaine, with Leader Schumer, with Senator Sanders, to codify and expand the SAVE plan and help borrowers in 4 important ways. First, it will allow more low-income borrowers to qualify for income-driven repayment plans, increasing the number of students who will be able to responsibly pay back their loans. Second, it protects borrowers from runaway interest. Third, it incentivizes former students to keep paying their loans rather than default by shortening the timeline for loan forgiveness from a maximum of 25 years to 15 years. You know, CBO did a report on this back in 2020, and what they found is that those who participate in an income-driven repayment plan are half as likely to default as people who don't. So it becomes a win-win. More money gets paid back to the Treasury, not less. Finally, it will help many more borrowers by making them eligible for these programs by including Parent Plus borrowers and borrowers with federal family education loans. We know that the SAVE plan and other income-driven repayment plans work. They increase repayment rates, they reduce default rates, they lower costs for families, and they create a vision for our young folks that, yes, you can afford to go to college here in the United States of America. No, it won't create a mountain of debt that will be a millstone around your neck. Don't we want to send that message of opportunity to all of our young folks so they can aspire to their dreams, so they can reach their highest potential, so they can return their success in helping their entire community and our entire nation thrive? Yes, of course we do. So colleagues on both sides of the aisle, let's join together in the vision of families thrive and billionaires pay their fair share. And let's do that by passing the SOAR Act. So, Mr. President, I propose that the Senate proceed to consideration of the SOAR Act. And to give you the precise technical language for that, as if in legislative session and notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions be discharged from further consideration as Senate Bill 1220 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. Further, the bill can be considered read and a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
To object?
The senator from Louisiana.
Mr. President, I rise to object to S1220, a bill seeking to transfer the burden of $230 billion in student debt to the 87% of Americans who chose not to go to college or already responsibly paid off their loans. To be clear, this legislation does not differentiate between those trapped with overwhelming debt and those who could easily pay back their loans. If this bill is enacted, a majority of those who borrowed money to get a bachelor's degree would not have to pay it back, would not have to pay back even the principal on their loans. 91% of new student debt would be eligible for reduced payments, and it would be subsidized by everybody watching on C-SPAN right now. There is no free lunch. These policies are as unfair as they are irresponsible. Where is the relief for the Louisiana truck driver who took out a loan to buy a truck? What about the hardworking mom who paid off her student loans but now struggles to afford her mortgage? Would this legislation give those Americans relief? No. It gives them a greater burden. The truck driver, that mom, they're on the hook for those who decided to go to college to get a degree to make more money. They would be on the hook for that, as well as their own cost of living. Now, I'm sure my Democratic colleagues will argue that some of those students are trapped with overwhelming debt, and this legislation will help them get out of it. But this bill does nothing to address the broken higher education system that created the overwhelming debt in the first place. It doesn't address the rising cost at colleges and universities. And let's point out that in the last 30 years, tuition and fees at private nonprofit colleges have risen by 75%. At public four-year institutions, increased by 102%. Meanwhile, according to a nonpartisan analysis, 23% of bachelor's degree programs, 43% of master's degree programs have a negative return on investment. What does that mean? It means you spend a lot of money to get your degree, but you don't actually increase your ability to earn more money because of that degree, and along the way, you get into student loan debt. We need real solutions to fix this broken system, and Republicans provide these solutions. As chair of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, I'm leading my committee's portion of the One Big Beautiful Bill, legislation that will make transformative changes to the higher education system. First, it reforms student loan repayment plans that cost American taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars. This includes fixing our income-driven repayment program that is targeted to help struggling Americans. Second, it increases affordability of higher education by eliminating inflationary loan programs that evidence shows drives higher tuition prices and cost taxpayers billions of dollars. Third, it restores accountability so that universities are not receiving federal loan dollars for programs that leave students worse off than if they had never entered that program. And lastly, this legislation increases access to career or technical education through establishing Workforce Pell. A young person from Louisiana who wants to be a master welder doesn't need to attend a four-year university, but they can now use their Pell Grant to attend a technical school, giving them the skills for a successful career. That is a wise investment of federal student loan dollars. Unlike S1220, the legislation before us today, Senate Republicans are putting forth real solutions to address the root causes of student loan crisis. I look forward to working with my colleagues to get the One Big Beautiful Bill across the finish line so we can fix the broken higher education system and ensure that every American can succeed. Mr. President, Democrats' legislation is unfair to the hundreds of millions of tax-paying Americans who will be forced to bear the burden of paying off someone else's student debt. It would make our higher education problems worse, not better, and for those reasons, I object.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President,
The senator from Oregon.
I enjoy working with my colleague from Louisiana, and he's made several points worth noting. He's noted that this strategy of enabling people to pay back their loan according to their income doesn't solve the large issue of why our colleges cost so much. And he's noted that it doesn't do anything about predatory college programs that charge a lot and deliver little. Now, I was here when Tom Harkin led the effort to shut down the for-profit programs that often weren't even accredited, but were signing up veterans like crazy and ripping them off, leaving them with massive debt. And we couldn't get any help from across the aisle to take that on. So he's right, it won't solve everything. But the idea that you pay according to your income, and as your income goes up, you pay back more. And the default rate is cut in half. So the federal government actually takes in more money than it would otherwise. And students believe that they do have an opportunity despite the high cost of college, because that's just not going to be fixed overnight. You know, Germany, tuition is zero. Germany has said every child should have the opportunity to thrive. But here in America, we make it so the rich have that opportunity, and ordinary families in my blue-collar community are going, we don't think our children can afford to go to college. That hurts all of us. It hurts every child whose dreams are crushed because of these high costs of college. I'm happy to work with my colleague from Louisiana on ideas on how we lower the cost of college. But we've got a lot of folks going to college right now. Let's help these students know that they can go through those doors as a freshman, and if they thrive, they're going to pay back their loans fast. And if they don't thrive so much in a higher income job or it's a public service job, they'll pay it back more slowly, but they'll never have to default. I think it's a vision worth continuing to work on, because our higher education system is not working as well as the system in many other countries that are saying every child will have an opportunity. I believe, like my father did, like my mother did, of America as a land of opportunity for every child, not just the children of the rich. Thank you, Mr. President.
Somehow I think your urologist may have asked you to cough, but that's okay. I'll finish. Kind of one of the nice things about being last is that you don't have a time limit. And so I may go a little bit longer than 5 minutes, but that's why. Dr. Christine, I really enjoyed our visit. You had mentioned, I think you used the term, to be an evangelist for those things that would make America healthy again, and to follow the science. Now, the science clearly, reproducibly, over and over again, have shown that vaccines are safe and that vaccines do not cause autism. And there's always this little bit of chatter out there, but when it's looked at by the mainstream of what the medical scientists look at, it's considered 2, 3, 4 standard deviations out, and the data over and over again reproducibly shows that they're safe and are not associated with autism. Right now we have a measles outbreak. We had 2 children die of vaccine-preventable diseases in West Texas. We had a pregnant woman lose her baby in Canada because she was exposed to someone who did not get vaccinated for measles, showing that we have a mutual responsibility. Just saying get vaccinated if you want to doesn't work for the pregnant woman who is then exposed and she loses her baby. And we're both pro-life, but you don't have to be pro-life to see that as an incredible tragedy. Are you willing to be an evangelist to tell people that vaccines have reproducibly been shown to be safe and that, by golly, you should be vaccinated so we don't lose another child?
So, Senator, I too enjoyed the time we had together, and Dr. Cassidy, I truly appreciated that day. As I've said here before the committee, I believe that vaccines save lives. I believe strongly that vaccines are an important part of our armamentarium as we promote public health and prevent disease. And if even one individual dies from a preventable disease, a disease that could be prevented by vaccination, that's certainly one too many. And I believe Secretary Kennedy feels that same way. I will certainly use my position, if confirmed as the Assistant Secretary for Health, to promote the health and the wellness of people in this country. I believe that vaccines are important. I believe that vaccinations are appropriate. My child is vaccinated. I also believe very strongly that vaccines, like any kind of medical therapy, are individual. And of course, there are going to be inherent risks and benefits with any medical therapy.
Let me stop you for a second. Of course, there's always risk, but there's been a lot of emphasis upon the risk, but no emphasis upon the risk of not being vaccinated. People don't die from getting vaccinated with measles. They just don't. People do die if they don't get vaccinated, or they have a chronic condition which shows up 13 years later, or if the child that was in utero when exposed is born may end up mentally retarded when otherwise they would have lived a long life. So I agree with you that there is this kind of set of side effects. But I think we would both agree, because you mentioned earlier you're basically an applied biologist, that the overwhelming weight of evidence is that these vaccines are safe, they are effective, they prevent death, they prevent chronic disease. Would you be an evangelist on that, ma'am?
I will absolutely be an evangelist. That vaccinations are important. Vaccines do save lives. I personally would recommend the measles vaccine. I believe that Secretary Kennedy is now doing the same. And so I will use that position to be an evangelist to help individuals understand and to bring them to want to pursue the appropriate vaccination schedule and what's right for them. So I guess the short answer to your question is yes.
Ms. Carey, I'm not an attorney. I'm a gastroenterologist. Like, what do I know about law except I don't like attorneys? No offense. I listened very carefully to your exchange with Dr. Hawley, Mr. Hawley. I'm sorry. I'm into it now with Christine. So am I to say that see if I interpret this correctly, because Hawley had some points there. If there is a regional staff that investigates a claim upon the issue upon you are saying, well, there's prosecutorial discretion, that the regional staff would have the ability to pursue that claim under the current precedent? Or were you saying that, no, you might pull that from them based upon your own discretion? I don't know. I'm just asking.
Thank you. The answer is the way that you presented it is correct. So once a new claim would come up in relation to the captive audience decision, the extant precedent is the Amazon decision. So in terms of conducting the investigation to determine whether or not there was merit, yes, they would base it on current board law. However, prosecutorial discretion rests with the general counsel. So there are many ways in which the act can be effectuated. It can be a withdrawal, it can be a dismissal, it can be to issue complaint. It can also be to make new arguments, to present them to an administrative law judge, likely with Lease.
I accept that. But if Hawley were still here, how would you allay his concerns that it would be your own discretion, independent of the inertia of the precedent, that would establish the course of action?
Correct. I mean, I believe that the agency is an independent agency, and I believe that the authority to make those prosecutorial decisions lies with the confirmed general counsel. And I would use that knowledge that I have, that I've garnered over the last 15 years of being, a board agent for over half of that, and was working practitioner, my knowledge of extant board law, to make a determination based on the facts of that case, whether or not to pursue a different standard or to continue under the precedent.
Okay. I think he's a little concerned that personal belief might put a thumb on the scale. Now, again, as I followed that, and maybe that's inherent in the definition of discretion.
I understand his concern, and I understand what you're saying. I'm not going to back away from something that I've said publicly in relation to a decision, but I take my job, if confirmed, as a civil servant. I took it very seriously when I worked there for 9 years. I think it's important. It's a role, and those individuals all have personal opinions. But every day when they come to work, they know what their job is, and their job is to effectuate the act. And I take that seriously, and I am committed to fulfilling that role as well, if confirmed.
And I think you pointed out that certainly the previous person in this role used that discretion as well.
Certainly. There were about 12 pages of cases that were overturned.
Yeah, okay. Well, hang on, where's my? I'd like to submit to the record support for Ms. Panuccio's nomination from a group of civil rights attorneys and practitioners with extensive experience in employment law and federal civil rights enforcement and policy for her to serve as EEOC Commissioner. And I acknowledge that this is submitted without objection. For any senator wishing to ask additional questions, questions for the record will be due at 5 p.m. tomorrow, July 17th. Thank you all for being here. The committee stands adjourned.
Senator Cassidy.
Thank you. I'll try and restore a little calm here. And I'm approaching this as a doctor, not as a senator. I am concerned about children's health, seniors' health, all of our health. And I applaud you for joining the president in a call for radical transparency. Thank you for that. I said yesterday, I believe it, that President Trump deserves a Nobel Prize for Operation Warp Speed. If he had been President Obama, he would have gotten it. But because of Operation Warp Speed, forcing the federal government to come to a vaccine development within 10 months when others said it couldn't be done, we saved millions of lives globally, trillions of dollars, we reopened economies, an incredible accomplishment. Mr. Secretary, do you agree with me that the president deserves a Nobel Prize for Operation Warp Speed?
Yeah, absolutely, Senator. That was phenomenal.
So let me ask you, but you just told Senator Bennett that the COVID vaccine killed more people than COVID.
Wait,
that was a statement.
I did not say that.
Okay, then let me ask, because you also were
Senator, I just want to make clear, I did not say that.
We'll check the record. That's a question of fact. You also said that you were also, as lead attorney for the Children's Health Defense, you engaged in multiple lawsuits attempting to restrict access to the COVID vaccine. Again, it surprises me that you think so highly of Operation Warp Speed when, as an attorney, you attempted to restrict access. Now, let me ask.
I'm happy to explain why.
I had 3 minutes and 30 seconds left.
All right.
It also surprises me because you've canceled, or HHS did, but apparently under your direction, $500 million in contracts using the mRNA vaccine platform that was critical to Operation Warp Speed. Again, an accomplishment that I think President Trump should get a Nobel Prize for. You canceled $500 million in contracts. Now, I grew up in a middle-class family, so $500 million seems, just to cancel, it seems like an incredible waste of money. But it also seems like a commentary upon what the president was attempting, what the president did in Operation Warp Speed, which is to create a platform by which to create vaccines. So this just seems inconsistent that you would agree with me the president deserves a tremendous amount of credit for this.
Is this a question, Senator Cassidy, or is this a speech that you don't want me to answer? Because I want to answer that question.
Please.
If it's a question.
But be tight, please.
First of all, the reason that Operation Warp Speed was genius is it did something nobody had ever been done. I don't think any president, but President Trump, could do it. It got the vaccine to market that was perfectly matched to the virus at that time when it was badly needed, because there was low natural immunity and there were people getting very badly injured by COVID. But it was also brought in therapeutics like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin and protocols for treatments. And there were no mandates. And then
okay, I have another question, so please, about 15
That's when I began litigating against President Biden's mandates. Now,
I'm sorry, let me go on because you've covered Dr. Menarez, I just entered into the record the op-ed from the Secretary and your report, and both of those suggest that you and Secretary Kennedy were actually pretty aligned upon CDC priorities. How many times did you meet with the Secretary in your 29 days? Be brief, I've got 5 minutes. Are you on?
Yes, can you hear me? I met with him twice. When he swore me in, he was in the room, he swore me in. And then I met him again on August 11th when he came down to tour the buildings that had been under the gunfire. And we chatted briefly.
And then you met the 25th as well?
And then the 25th, that's correct, yes.
Okay, and how many meetings were around the period of the 25th?
We had 3 distinct meetings that day.
Okay, and what did he tell you to do?
In the first meeting, briefly, in the first meeting, he asked me to commit to firing scientists or resign. He asked me to pre-commit to signing off on each and one of the forthcoming ACIP recommendations, regardless of whether or not there was scientific evidence.
And what were those recommendations? Did you have a foreshadowing of what they would be?
I did not. We did not get into any substance
But he
about what
wanted you
those,
to, he wanted you to approve them.
he just wanted blanket approval.
Okay.
And if I could not commit to approval of each and every one of the recommendations that would be forthcoming, I needed to resign. I did not resign, and that is when he told me he had already spoken to the White House about having me removed.
Did he ever communicate he was going to change the childhood vaccination schedule?
Not until that very day. In that morning meeting, he said that the childhood vaccine schedule would be changing starting in September, and I needed to be on board with it.
Did he ever suggest that that he was speaking for the president?
In that morning meeting, he did say that he had spoken to the president. He spoke to the president every day about changing the childhood vaccine schedule.
Okay. Did Secretary Kennedy ask you to speak to anybody outside of HHS?
He did. In the second meeting that day, he indicated that one of his colleagues or collaborators, I don't know what the relationship is, was coming into town the following week, and he wanted me to meet with that person. Who was that person? The person was named Aaron Siri.
Aaron Siri, is he the trial attorney who wanted to get rid of the polio vaccine allegedly, and President Trump slapped him down and said he couldn't do that? Is that the same Aaron Siri?
I don't know the second part of that, but I do know that there were public reports that he is the individual who had suggested getting rid of the polio vaccine.
Okay. Now, Secretary Kennedy told the Finance Committee that he did not ask you to pre-approve, but that you were biased against the new ACIP, and he just asked you to keep an open mind. Did he cite any data or science as relates to the potential ACIP recommendations to persuade you to support them?
He did not have any data or science to point to. As a matter of fact, we got into an exchange where I had suggested that I would be open to changing childhood vaccine schedules if the evidence or science were supportive. And he responded that there was no science or evidence associated with the childhood vaccine schedule. And he elaborated that CDC had never collected the science or the data to make it available related to the safety and efficacy.
To be clear, he said there was not science or data, but that you still expected you to change the schedule.
Correct.
Okay. Dr. Oury, Dr. Menares has just said the Secretary directed her to accept vaccine recommendations without seeing them and for which there is no science. Related to tomorrow's ACIP meeting, who decided what would be on the agenda?
So I don't have great visibility into that. I know the senior advisor and HHS counselor worked with our staff and the designated federal official and proposed items.
Okay, and who is the senior counselor?
The senior advisor is Stuart Burns, and the HHS counselor is Ren Archer.
And those are political appointees answerable to the Secretary?
Yes.
Is that the way does normally the Cabinet Secretary or political staff set the agenda for a scientific meeting?
Not for the past decade. I was at CDC.
So this is the first time that's been the case?
Yes.
And in preparing materials for the meeting, were you told to disregard science or to enhance science, or what were you supposed to do?
For the last meeting, we had developed...
I'm talking about this meeting coming up.
So for this meeting, we didn't have work groups other than one for COVID. So CDC scientists were being asked by ACIP to develop questions and recommendations. I did suggest additional questions that the hepatitis B work group look at so that they could look at differences in age groups. The senior advisor was concerned that could bias moving away from a birth dose. I asked how asking questions and providing data could do bias if we didn't have the answers yet.
Biased against moving away from, you're suggesting that they wanted to move away from the birth dose, but they were afraid that your data would say that they should retain it?
Correct.
That's okay. Senator Sanders.
Mr. President.
The senator from Louisiana.
Are we in a quorum?
We are.
I ask that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, hurricane season ends November 30th, 2 months left to go. Last week marked the first anniversary of Hurricane Helene, and I see from reports that the area of North Carolina most affected is still terribly affected. It was such a severe storm that people in Louisiana went from Louisiana to help
North Carolina and other states with their emergency operations on the ground. This weekend saw 2 Category 4 storms churning in the western Atlantic. Thankfully, they did not hit, or they do not appear they'll hit our coast. Still, the storms remind people in Louisiana and other states that flooding is not a matter of if, but rather when. Now, Democrats, as we know, are pushing us towards a government shutdown. What does that mean for the National Flood Insurance Program? Imagine you're about to close on a house in 2 days, and the bank requires you to have flood insurance. If you're in a special flood hazard area, by the way, over half of Louisiana is a special flood hazard area, and you're purchasing a house with help from a federally backed loan, you will not be closing on that house, nor will you be able to renew your existing policy. All because Democrats have rejected a clean, continuing resolution to keep the government open. Let me repeat. They are walking away from a bill that simply extends the existing budget for 7 weeks to allow further negotiation. Instead, they demand a highly partisan bill, which would add more than $1 trillion to our nation's debt. They want taxpayer-funded health care for illegal immigrants, transgender surgery for minors, and to cut $50 billion from the Rural Hospital Fund Republicans created as part of our Working Families Tax Cuts bill. Now, back to flood insurance, Americans are left wondering how a shutdown will affect it. While Democrats are writing checks to the far left, folks are wondering if they can close on their house. Now, I'll tell you what the American people care about. They want the government to do its job. They want disaster recovery when needed. They want flood insurance that works. They want rural hospitals to stay open. They want energy security and a balanced budget, not trillion-dollar add-ons that only serve a political agenda. Mr. President, the American people deserve accountability. They expect Congress to put their needs before partisan politics. If this shutdown happens, it means that the National Flood Insurance Program cannot renew policies. That's 500,000 people in Louisiana, millions across the country, unable to renew policies while we're still in hurricane season. It'll mean delays in disaster aid and emergency response coordination. It means uncertainty for families still recovering from Hurricane Helene and other past storms. Now, this is personal for folks in my state. If Democrats would stop trying to please the fringe of their party and start focusing on the real immediate needs of the American people, like keeping the government open, maintaining flood insurance, protecting access to rural health care, we can solve this today. So I ask my fellow senators who are Democrats, who are you working for? Are you working for the American families watching the weather, hoping the next storm doesn't wipe out everything they built? Are you working for veterans waiting on care, the seniors relying on Social Security checks, or the communities who count on rural hospitals in a crisis? Or are you working for political activists and special interest groups that have nothing to do with the lives of the people you were elected to serve? Mr. President, the path forward is simple. Pass a clean bill to keep the government open. Now, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the next portion be entered separately into the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, middle-class Americans are taking it on the chin. You ask anybody buying groceries, and you start talking about high grocery prices, their heads just start to nod. American farmers can't hire workers to pick their crop. Farm products are being tariffed. Beef and coffee prices are through the roof. For the first time ever seen since it's been tracked, ground beef is over $6 a pound, and it keeps rising. To put that in perspective, it was under $4 when President Trump left office in 2021. And people can't afford to live if you combine the cost of the things they absolutely need, their health care, their flood insurance, property and casualty or homeowners insurance, car insurance, mortgages, car payments. After that, they're sitting around an empty kitchen table worried as to whether there is enough left in their pocketbook to buy the groceries to feed their family. Now, with 67% of Americans saying they're living paycheck to paycheck, you can imagine how many empty kitchen tables there are. Last week, I got a message from a woman in my state who lives on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain. She told me this is the problem she's facing. She can't afford to live and to pay for her groceries. By the way, she's a teacher. Good job. Been for 26 years, but she can't afford to live and pay for groceries. The middle class is taking it on the chin. And a lot of Americans are in the same situation as she is. No matter how hard they work, no matter how many jobs they work, sometimes 2 or 3, they can't keep up. Now, since 2000, housing demand has grown more than housing supply. Roughly 46% of Americans let their credit card payments roll over month to month because they cannot afford to pay in full. That's almost 50% of people in the United States are not paying their credit card bills, and that's with 21% to 26% interest rates on that. Almost a quarter of Americans don't think they will ever pay off their credit card debt. And the hole keeps getting deeper. Now, Republicans are trying to address this. In the Working Families Tax Cuts bill, we increase wages by eliminating taxes on tips and taxes on overtime. Most seniors will not pay taxes on their Social Security payments. We increase the child tax credit. We incentivize companies to start building in the United States now instead of waiting for 10 years. We attract private investment into low-income communities by giving investors a tax break in exchange for developing economically distressed communities. Our goal is to create jobs, better paying jobs, as we spur this revitalization. We can increase affordable housing for families and workers by expanding and strengthening the low-income housing tax credit, which will help build more than 1.6 million affordable homes nationwide over the next decade. Again, we give tax incentives now for those better-paying manufacturing and construction jobs. We're working to decrease the high cost of health care with, if you will, programs to incentivize the education of more nurses, to lower the cost of prescription drugs, and to lower the cost of health insurance. We have proposed ways to lower the cost of the National Flood Insurance Program, which in my state is one thing that just saps from people's pocketbook. Now, the government shutdown will not help. It creates unnecessary worry, puts a strain on working families, veterans, and folks living on a fixed income. The American middle class has taken it on the chin. Republicans are working to give the American people hope instead of one more body blow. And with that, I yield. The Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions will please come to order. It's been nearly 100 years since the core of our nation's labor laws were passed. Since then, the economy and the way we work has changed. Congress should update labor laws for businesses, unions, and workers to make our nation competitive in this 21st century economy. President Trump deserves a lot of credit. He is committed to delivering the most pro-business, pro-worker administration in history. In pursuit of this, he's built a strong coalition of businesses, unions, and workers united to increase prosperity for all. As Help Chair, this committee should deliver on President Trump's pro-worker, pro-business, pro-family agenda. By the way, let's get some perspective here. In the last 10 years, we've had 4 different administrations, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats. Now, when I speak to businesses in Louisiana and elsewhere, they feel whipsawed by changing administration. Everybody loves it when their team's in charge, and then their team is not in charge, and then they hate it. What we learn is that no one is in charge forever. I think that gives us the responsibility and indeed the opportunity to pass something upon which all can agree, in which we can bring stability to businesses, unions, and workers. Now, to do this, we have to build consensus on lasting changes that benefit all. My colleagues' continued engagement is essential. And my purpose in these hearings is to come out with actionable legislation that can pass on the floor, which means it can get 60 votes. Bringing certainty to all involved so that somebody planning their business, planning their worker activities 15 years from now will have some sense of where the guardrails are, which I think that sense has been lost. Earlier this month, the committee heard from a wide range of voices on how to improve labor laws to protect workers' rights and expand freedoms. First, we must strengthen workers' voice in deciding how their hard-earned dollars are spent
especially when it comes to funding political activities that do not benefit workers. Workers should not be forced to fund ideologies and entities that violate their beliefs. Congress must protect workers' rights in the workplace and on the picket line, defending workers from harassment and abuse and empowering them to protect their personal data. We should curb frivolous, unfair labor practice charges that worsen the NLRB's backlog and delay workers from asserting their rights in the workplace. Another serious issue is the impact of illegal immigration on the workforce, taking jobs and driving down wages for hard-working Americans. The Trump administration has made this a priority. It is something the committee will examine closely. Finally, Congress must restore worker choice in the unionization process. This includes considering ways to enhance the integrity of union elections, helping workers reach that first contract in a timely manner, ensuring they can determine when their labor contract is working for them. These are key principles that will guide this conversation and hopefully our future legislative action. By reforming our labor laws, we will deliver on President Trump's pro-worker legacy and empower the middle class to achieve the American dream. And with that,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing, and for our witnesses for being here today. Some of you I've met with personally, so appreciate your time on such an important topic. This country has blessed the world with numerous treatments and cures for all kinds of diseases. In the 50 years since biotech became a reality, American biotech is strong and growing in Florida. I am one of the newest U.S. Senator from Florida. I am told it is home now to nearly 3,000 biotech, pharmaceutical, and medical development enterprises. We are home to 27 bio members. Immune Bio, based in Boca Raton, is a new biotech focused on developing 2 new drugs, one novel therapy to treat Alzheimer's and another to treat an ultra-rare pediatric skin inflammation disease. But like so many other companies, it chose to plant roots in this country because we have free markets, deep pools of capital, and a highly talented workforce. I believe Florida is only becoming more blessed with more talent in this area. So we've seen progress from startups having multiple drugs heading into phase 3 trials, and that demonstrates how small science-driven companies can drive significant progress for patients with nothing else that can help. In September, the Miami Times reported that Florida is the first in the nation for investment in clinical trials, now ahead of California and Texas. So that to say biotech is a burgeoning sector of my state's economy, and I agree with the chairman that Congress should work to unleash the power of American life sciences. So thankfully, we're seeing this president and other initiatives that have invested over $425 billion in investments for R&D, manufacturing, and jobs. I think that is incredible, and I expect great things throughout this administration. Mr. Crowley, I'll start with you. I was touched by your story. It is truly amazing, and I think it's emblematic of what we can do when Americans have a personal cause and the resources to do something about it, and the policy that would support successful outcomes. And that's so important and why this committee is addressing this important topic. I've heard from so many of my constituents that a faster, clearer guidance from FDA, particularly on rare neurological diseases, would be greatly beneficial. They've told me that additional support for accelerated approval pathways could contribute to huge breakthroughs for patients. McCary recently announced the FDA's intent to establish a new conditional approval pathway for drugs, which could further empower biotech to bring a greater diversity of cures to patients suffering with rare disease. How do you believe, well, what is your opinion on that announcement, and how do you believe that we as Congress can make constructive changes at FDA to empower biotech and bring more breakthrough therapies to market?
Great. Senator Moody, thank you for your question, and thank you again for everything in the state of Florida. When our children were originally diagnosed, one of the first centers we went to all the way in Florida from where we lived in New Jersey was Shands Medical Center. So you've got the right ecosystem, the right environment. Years ago,
Well, it's the University of Florida.
The University of Florida, yes.
Go Gators.
Go Gators.
My school, but I'm just saying that.
You know, for Senator, you're absolutely right. When we got into this world,
The senator is out of order.
He always does that to me.
I'll throw in a go Irish. So, Senator, you're absolutely right. When I came into this world, all we focused on was science, medicine, technology, raising capital. Now in this world of rare diseases, we've never had more technologies, more opportunities where doctors don't have to tell families, parents, what they told us years ago, that I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. There are a range of options. Most of our challenges now are man-made, including regulatory. And we need to modernize. We need to strengthen the FDA. We don't want lower standards. We don't want them to approve everything. There are advanced regulatory tool sets, biomarkers, surrogate endpoints, adaptive clinical studies, Bayesian statistics. What we need is an FDA that's modernized, strengthened, and that uses the entire tool set and looks at every disease and every proposed molecule through a risk-benefit assessment. Nothing is without risk, but take a look at each of these diseases, particularly in the rare diseases. So we're seeing very positive moves toward that, the creation of the Rare Disease Innovation Hub, other moves that I think we'll continue to see from the commissioner. So we've provided some ideas, and we'll continue to work with the FDA on that, but it's incredibly important so that we get as many therapies to absolutely everybody in need as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Louisiana.
Madam President, I'm going to try and present a way forward for Democrats, Republicans, and Americans out of our current situation with a different proposal than people have already thought of. Now, the government should have been shut down for 38 days, and tomorrow we're going to vote again, and tomorrow the vote will again fail. But in Americans, Congress is frustrated. We need to open the government. So, if to open the government we need to talk about health care, let's talk about health care. Let's have a conversation in the family. We have an affordability crisis, and health insurance is part of it. Now, this is personal to me. I'm a doctor, practiced in a hospital for the uninsured and the poorly insured for 20 years. And many of those people that came to see me were middle-income Americans who could not afford their medical bills and could not afford insurance. I want to see this solved. But if we're going to solve it now in this present circumstance, we need to move beyond entrenched ways of thinking that have settled us in our camps and refuse to allow us to listen to the other person. And I thank some of my Democratic colleagues for being here. We've got to be creative. Now, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it, tried to make health care affordable by giving insurance companies more money. The enhanced premium tax credits, EPTC, is the latest example. It sends, next year it would send $26 billion to insurers, hoping that families see smaller bills. But that actually doesn't make health care less expensive. And for some, it actually makes the health insurance more expensive if you're not getting subsidized care on the exchange. So we can do better than just papering over the cost with subsidies. Instead of paying insurance companies to manage our money, let's trust Americans with a pre-funded, flexible savings account worth as much as the enhanced premium tax credit that they would receive. Let me repeat that. A pre-funded, not out of their salary, but pre-funded from the federal taxpayer, equivalent in value to the enhanced premium tax credit that they would receive. Now, let me make it clear. I'm not speaking for the Republican caucus. I'm not speaking for President Trump. I'm not even speaking as the Help Committee chairman. I'm speaking as a senator and as an American that sees us at an impasse and is trying to think differently about how we can move forward. So, I'm going to present to my fellow Americans an idea that hopefully will move us out of this stalemate and go forward. And I'm going to try and speak as if I'm speaking to the American back home. Here's the problem. Under the enhanced premium tax credit, if your insurance premium goes up, if the insurance company decides to pay more, they just get more subsidy from the taxpayer. Now, insurance companies get paid no matter what, and it doesn't matter how expensive the tab is. There's absolutely no incentive to bring the cost down. There's no transparency as to what the care really costs, and there is absolutely no reward for the family that goes to a place which is less expensive. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone. You're hiding the fracture, but you're not fixing the broken bone. Let's fix the broken bone, which is high health care cost. So, put simply, the enhanced premium tax credit does not empower patients. It enriches insurance companies. By the way, they're important. We need them. But if I have a choice of empowering you, the American,
are enriching an insurance company, I and we should pick our fellow American. Now, imagine a different type of help. Not paying the insurance company another subsidy, but putting money pre-funded, not out of your salary, but roughly equal to the enhanced premium tax credit, put that into an account that you control. Every eligible American citizen on the exchange would receive this federally pre-funded flexible spending account. And it would work like the prepaid health account you use for real-world health expenses. It would actually have more flexibility than your current insurance proposal. You go to the dentist, it can pay for dental care. You go to the orthodontist, it can pay for your orthodontal care. It can pay for eyeglasses, which typically insurance does not pay for. Prescription drugs, medical supplies, your deductible, your copay, it can pay for it all. Now, it wouldn't pay for insurance premiums. This is about you spending directly for your health care costs, not about enriching insurance companies. It would pay for the care that families actually use. That's what a pre-funded flexible spending account actually does. I keep emphasizing pre, because I mention this to people, and they say, wait a second, this has to come out of my salary. No, this would be the money that would go to an enhanced premium tax credit, and instead it goes into this account that you control. Now, it seems complicated for some. I go and I mention it to them. I say, oh, boy, this is something different, Bill. This is a great idea, but, it's kind of like, just too different. 72% of Americans getting their health care through some government entity are offered flexible savings accounts. 47% of people getting insurance through their employer are offered FSAs. This is something that is used by millions of Americans already. So what I'm proposing is just to give this option to people on the exchanges. And by the way, the federal government already offers flexible savings accounts to people on the small business exchanges. Members of Congress, we are on the Obamacare Small Business Exchange. We have the option of choosing an FSA. My family has one. And the Department of Treasury already has an office through which they funnel money to pay for these flexible spending accounts that I, as an individual, choose to get. So what we're speaking of is just offering to people on the exchanges, that on the individual exchange, that which is already offered to people on the small business exchange, and paying for it by the same mechanism in which it's already done through that exchange. Now, still, there's going to be some bureaucracy involved. But if there's any president that can overcome the inertia of the bureaucracy to make it happen by January 1, 2026, is Donald J. Trump. Donald Trump is the man who, when it was told it would take 18 years, 10 years, 18 months to come up with a vaccine and a program to prevent COVID transmission, he did it in 10 to 11 months. This president can overcome the inertia, and we have a running start because the federal government is already doing this. Now, let me make clear the key differences between enhanced premium tax credits and federally funded flexible spending accounts. First, who gets the money? Under the enhanced premium tax credit, insurance companies. Under this, it is patients and families. What can it be used for? Here, the premium tax credits go for insurance premiums. Period, stop, full stop, boom, it goes to the insurance company. Here, real care. Your doctor visit, your deductible, your copay, your dentist, your glasses, your prescriptions, that sort of thing. Who makes the decision? The insurance company. Just wait and fight with them about a pre-authorization. Under the flexible spending account, you make the decision. You have the power. And lastly, does it lower cost? No. It is pretty clear if we continue to fund insurance companies no matter what they pay, it drives up the cost. In contrast, if you empower the patient, that mother is going to find the most affordable option. It's been studied. If you give people something that they perceive as their own money, they hunt for that bargain. By the way, if they go and they find out that the cash price is cheaper
than what the insurance company would charge them, they will have the option of using this for the cash price. So we have reforms in here that give the patient even more power. Good thing about that, as the patient saves money, so does the taxpayer, and that's a good thing. So the pre-funded, flexible spending account doesn't treat people like dependents of the government as do the enhanced premium tax credits. It treats you like a capable consumer who knows what is best for your family. You decide where to go for dental work. You decide your pharmacy. You decide whether to pay the cash price or the negotiated price that the insurance company offers you. And instead of Washington paying insurance companies to manage your day-to-day care, you manage it with fairness, transparency, and flexibility. Now, some will ask, won't this cost money? Of course. In the first year, it'll be about the same amount as the enhanced premium tax credit. And my Democratic colleagues should like that. But the individual would be getting better value through the federally pre-funded FSA because she is spending it on that which she actually needs as opposed to up to 20% of it going for overhead, profit, and administrative cost. It isn't just fiscally responsible, it's common sense. Who wouldn't rather have their money in their own pocket than for the insurance company to dictate how they spend it? So here's the choice before us. In conclusion, we can keep paying insurance companies to paper over the higher cost behind confusing bills in a system which actually raises the cost for some, or we can give Americans the tools, we can trust our fellow Americans to pay for their care directly at fair prices with transparency. If you will, it puts patients first, not insurers. It encourages competition. It rewards smart choices, and it begins to make health care truly affordable, not by inflating subsidies, but by unleashing the power of the consumer. Let's stop writing blank checks to insurance companies. Let's invest in our fellow Americans. I say this, we have to first open the government. This takes writing some legislation. We have to open the government. But we have to be willing to take a risk to solve a problem and not be afraid to do something different. I have seen in our chamber right now a hunkering down. We've not been able to solve it, so we're not going to try anything different. We're just going to wear the other side down until they wave the white flag. Now is the time to be creative. I'm a rock rib Republican, but I will say what I just offered is not a Republican solution. It is not a Democratic solution. It is an American solution. Let's open the government. Let's work together. Let's fix health care by giving the American more power, not the insurance company. Thank you.
Senator.
A question
From Washington. Without objection.
Thank you. Will my colleague yield for a question? Absolutely. Thank you. I noticed in your proposal, you're talking about something that you would hope to affect January of next year. Is that correct?
That is the goal, to have this ready for next year.
What is the senator from Louisiana's interpretation of how the market controls the? You're trying to create a market mechanism where you're giving the consumer the same amount of money you would give them in the tax credits to make the insurance more affordable only through a health savings account. But how do you know once you gave that in the health savings account, the market is going to not still have an increase above that amount? So how do you think this affects the market?
Wonderful question. First, this is a flexible savings account, not a health savings account. There is a legal distinction. I want to make that. When the enhanced premium tax credits are not renewed, we know the insurance companies have already set up their rates. And so the consumer, our fellow American, will be choosing from the offerings that have been made by the insurance company for them to choose from. The difference would be, and they will see, by the way, that the policy for someone at 400% of federal poverty level costs about $2,500 more a year than it otherwise would have with the enhanced premium tax credit. This would be supplemental. We would say to that individual, you're at 400% of federal poverty level. Your policy is $2,500 more a year. You will get a flexible spending account pre-funded
to help offset the cost of this. Now, if it's my family, I would say, I got $2,500. Maybe instead of going for a silver plan, I'll go for a bronze plan, because now I can offset the higher deductible with my flexible savings account. And because I'm going for a bronze plan, my premium will be lower. But that's trusting the American people. We are plugging into the current insurance market. We're actually not changing at all how it functions.
Would yield for another question. I'm assuming that you think affordability is the key. I certainly think affordability is the key. Nobody wants to subsidize expensive health insurance. We want to create market mechanisms to drive down the cost of health insurance, not just spend money to buy expensive insurance, whether you buy it through the tax credit or buy it through a health savings account. We want to create those mechanisms. So again, all of this is going to take place in November and December, right now and December. So somehow you would make some calculation in January about what would go into a savings account, or you're thinking of a flat number?
That's a wonderful question. No. If somebody, the federal government knows, or put it this way, many states have calculated what would be the insurance rate with an enhanced premium tax credit, and what will the insurance rate be without the enhanced premium tax credit. It has been calculated for our fellow Americans what the value of an enhanced premium tax credit would be if they signed up for a certain policy in their state, given their age and their health condition. They know that. The question is whether they get the credit or not. Well, they're not going to get it, so the policy is going to be higher. And this, under the plan, if we can agree to it, they would then get the FSA in an amount equivalent to that which they did not receive as a payment to the insurance company. Instead, it would be a payment to the flexible savings account they would have, and that they would then use it for these services.
If the senator would continue to yield, the issue is that, you know, so much of this is already set up, and I think you're trying to be creative in a way to, instead of the Alexander Murray cost revenue sharing, I think you're trying to figure out something that would get people the same amount of money to make them whole over the next year or two. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So I would say what we're trying to do is make people, as the market is out there, whole over the next year or two. That's exactly what we're trying to do. We're happy to debate how we make health insurance more affordable after that. That has been a goal of our side of the aisle for decades. We want to make it more affordable. Now, we all get to be measured about how successful we've been on that, but I think that we're going to continue to strive to make it more affordable, and really are proud that we drove down the uninsured rate with the Affordable Care Act, because we covered more people, thereby lowering costs because not having so much uncompensated care. So I'm glad to see somebody saying, let's talk and let's put a proposal out there. Happy to continue to have a dialogue about any idea that helps us move forward. But the issue is that so many Americans are in this moment right now making these decisions, and how you affect that for the next 2 years is the biggest question. And you and I know, if we said, okay, we're huddling tomorrow, or the finance committee is huddling tomorrow, then everybody would be up here trying to convince us not to do various things. So the question is, how can we protect the marketplace for the next year or two in the simplest way, and then get about us going back to business, talking to each other, trying to work out what are the best creative ideas for lowering health insurance costs. I don't know why we haven't done a PBM bill. I mean, my colleague Senator Grassley and I have a bill. I think you have a proposal. Other people have a proposal. We're letting PBMs get away with so much in the expense of prescription drugs. I don't know why we don't spend all our time driving down the cost of health insurance. So I'm happy to work creatively on ways to protect the market over the next 2 years so that we can finally get to some creative discussion. So I thank the senator.
Thank you for the questions, and let me just respond very quickly. I think the beauty of what I'm proposing is it fits in very nicely with the insurance markets as they currently are. It doesn't require anything to change between now and January the 1st. It is too late to change those plans and those rates. It is just too late. This does not require those rates to change. This would be something which could benefit our fellow Americans next year and could be implemented by then. Yes, the bureaucracy is going to have to work hard. President Trump can get them to work hard. You mentioned several other reforms. I am in total agreement. We should be working, again, Democrats, Republicans, that's what we need to do to get something done, in order to come together for a set of proposals that will lower health care costs. And both as a member of the committee, we both serve on Senate Finance, as well as the chairman of the Help Committee, it is my intent to do that. We've got to do that. But this can work this year for Americans who are going to be on the exchanges, and that's my hope. With that, I yield. Thank you.
From Louisiana, yield to some very quick questions. Yes, sir. First question I have for you, Senators. How many Democrat colleagues are in the chamber today, right now?
Unfortunately, none.
So zero, not one single Democrat is in the chamber listening, debating, having a dialogue with you. Question number two, if you're a union worker in my state, Ohio, do these Biden, Obamacare, COVID-era subsidies lower their health costs?
Absolutely not.
If you're somebody on Medicare, no matter where you are in America, do these COVID-era Biden, Obamacare subsidies lower your deductibles?
Absolutely not.
If you get private insurance through a small business like the one I used to own, do these Biden-era COVID subsidies lower your health care costs?
Does nothing to benefit those people you're describing.
If you're unfortunately somebody who is having a tough time and you're on Medicaid, you're disabled, children, do these Biden-era COVID subsidies lower your deductibles or your out-of-pocket costs?
No.
So none of the people I just mentioned. Not union workers, not people on Medicare, not people on Medicaid, not people on private insurance, not unions that negotiated incredible rates. None of them will see lower health care costs. Am I accurate in that?
You're absolutely accurate.
Who stands to gain by the federal government writing a check for $26 billion to do what the Democrats want in order to open the people's government?
Well, insurance companies most directly, and there will be lower premiums.
But just to be clear, the money goes directly to the insurance company, correct?
Correct.
It doesn't go through the pocket of the consumer. So if for example, I want to go find a doctor that's going to offer treatment for less money because my deductible's too high, this doesn't help me because I'm not getting the money. It's going to go to the insurance company, correct?
Correct.
And Senator, you're so smart on this topic, and you're the chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. Is that true?
Correct.
Who was the previous chairman?
Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders. Okay. Bernie Sanders was chairman when, again, just to be clear
last Congress.
Which would have been through 2024?
Yeah, he's for 2 years.
And the Biden-era Obamacare subsidies were extended in 22, is that correct?
Correct, I think that's right.
To expire in 25.
To expire in 25.
So who voted for the expiration date of 2025?
Not Republicans, rather Democrats.
So just to be clear, the Democrats voted to have these subsidies expire this year, correct?
Correct.
To your knowledge, was there a hearing last year in 2024 in which the Democrats got together and say, whoa, these Biden-era COVID Obamacare subsidies, we set them to expire in 25, we should really make them permanent or extend them? Was there a single hearing in your committee about that topic?
There was not.
So, wait, I'm confused. They set the expiration date at 25, and then they didn't have one hearing to say, my God, now how about in December of 24? They knew they lost the election. Did they have an emergency meeting in December of 2024 and said, these Biden-era COVID Obamacare subsidies are going to expire. We don't know the Republicans are going to extend them. We need to do that. Did they add it to the continuing resolution that funded the government in December then, when they had total control of this chamber? Did they do it then?
They did not.
So this is a political stunt, and the American people need to see it for what it is. My career, I negotiated my whole life. Negotiation is about leverage. Would you agree?
Yep.
What leverage are the Democrats using in this negotiation?
Unfortunately, shutting down the government.
What does that mean, shutting down the government? Who's the leverage? Is it air traffic controllers that aren't getting paid? The Capitol Police that aren't getting paid? Yesterday, we tried to fund federal workers who are forced to work. Is that true?
Correct.
Democrats voted that down. Is that correct?
Correct.
Would you have a hard time walking into this building, Senator, and seeing those Capitol Police officers out there and your staff and knowing that you voted not to pay them?
I cannot imagine feeling good about that.
Knowing that you walked by TSA to go to your lobbyist retreat in Napa Valley, and you know that you are responsible for them not getting paid, that they're your leverage, SNAP recipients, Head Start recipients. They're using the American people's suffering as political leverage. That's how far gone the Democrat Party is. What you're offering would hurt insurance companies' pocketbooks, would it not?
Insurance companies will do pretty well no matter what.
But this would hurt their pocket.
But it would take $26 billion that would instead go to an insurance company, and instead it gives it to a family for the. I always use the feminine. Women make all the decisions in healthcare. It would give her the ability to make a best decision for real care for her family, finding the best value for her dollar. 100% of it would go to her, to all of those, and they would make a better decision.
Two final questions, and I will yield the floor. Our great senator from West Virginia needs to speak. $26 billion. $26 billion, a number that most Americans can't even conceive. The government is staying closed because Democrats want to give $26 billion more to insurance companies, and you're proposing to give that to the American people instead. Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Last question. The COVID Biden-era subsidies were set to expire in 2025 by Democrats. Did you know that when they had power, they set the EV, electric vehicle subsidies, to expire in 2032?
Wait. So just to understand, the EV subsidies did not expire until 2032, but this subsidy for people's health insurance expired this year.
Correct, and they were $7,500. You could lease a Rolls Royce, a Mercedes, a Lamborghini, and if you did that, the government would give you $7,500, Madam President. I want the American people to think about that when they understand how far gone the Democrat Party has gone. Thank you for your presentation.
Yield. Phone call?
No, we are not.
Mr. President, there are reports that the government will be reopened tonight or tomorrow morning. And all I can say is it's about time. It's been 40 days too long. But we also know that there's going to be some vote in the not so distant future on what do we do about high health insurance cost, and then hopefully another vote as to what can we do about the high health care costs that are driving the high health insurance costs. And we need to talk now. We can't just come upon the vote and suddenly have a solution. Rather, people need to be thinking about it between now and then, about the solutions that benefit the American people. Clearly, we have a problem with the affordability of health care and of health insurance. And of course, that's related. And this is something that in my professional life as a physician, I addressed over 20-something years before entering political life. I practiced in a public hospital for the uninsured for over 2 decades, seeing middle-income and lower-income Americans, fellow Americans, who for whatever reason couldn't afford their insurance or couldn't afford their health care, and they came to the hospital for the uninsured. Now, so, health insurance, health care costs, very complicated. And we've got to be a little bit more creative than just the federal government throwing money at it. Obamacare tried to do that, and it has not worked. The enhanced premium tax credits, or the EPTC, is the latest example. It was a COVID program, unrelated to the original Obamacare program, and the enhanced premium tax credits sent billions of taxpayer dollars straight to the insurer, hoping that families would see smaller bills. But you know, it might money over
paper money over the high health insurance costs, but it did nothing for health care costs. And by the way, it also made health insurance more expensive for many. So I think we can do better than just hiding the cost of high health care and high health insurance costs by the federal government spending billions more. So, an idea that I'm asking my colleagues and the American people to consider is a pre-funded federal flexible spending account. Now, let me make a couple things clear. First, I am not speaking for John Thune, the majority leader. I'm not speaking for Donald Trump. In fact, although I'm the chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee, I'm more speaking as Bill Cassidy, a doctor that worked with the uninsured for 20 years and is now representing the great state of Louisiana. And I'm speaking to my colleagues and to fellow Americans, asking all of us to put aside our prejudice, to put aside our kind of, oh no, gosh, a Republican's proposing it, or a Democrat's proposing it, so therefore I must oppose. No, to actually come together in good faith to try and find a solution. So let me first describe what I'm speaking of. First, there are two types of tax credits on the Affordable Care Act exchanges, the Obamacare exchanges. And I'm going into this for a reason. One is the baseline tax credit that was enacted into law in 2010 that lowers premium costs for those less than 400% of federal poverty. So, first one started in 2010 under Obamacare, the original legislation. It goes to people making less than 400% of federal poverty. During COVID, there was another sum added called the enhanced premium tax credit. And that gives some extra benefits to those less than 400% of federal poverty level, but began to cover people over 400% of federal poverty level. So two pots of money. One pot dates from 2010, part of the original Affordable Care Act law, and the other passed by the Biden administration during the COVID pandemic, benefiting those above 400% of federal poverty. What I'm proposing does not touch that baseline. What I'm about to propose does not touch the monies that were set aside in 2010 under the Affordable Care Act. Why do I say that? President Trump endorsed the concept I'll be speaking of, and one of my Democratic colleagues said, wait, are you going to give all the insurance money for these accounts? No, time out, absolutely not. We're going to leave that portion which was part of the baseline alone, not touching it at all, but trying to do something with the enhanced premium tax credits that only began most recently by President Biden under the COVID pandemic. That begs the question, why were enhanced premium tax credits necessary? Premiums have gone up so much. The Affordable Care Act was supposed to lower the cost of health care. The cost of health care has exploded. The cost of health insurance has exploded. And unfortunately, under the enhanced premium tax credit, it doesn't matter what the premium is. The federal taxpayer throws billions more at it. And the insurance company lost the incentive to negotiate down prices because whatever the price was, the taxpayer would help pay for it. And we misaligned the incentives to where the insurance companies actually do better if health care costs are high. Now, by the way, I'm not here to bash insurance company. We need them, they're essential, but everybody's going to respond to incentives, and the incentive here is not the right incentive. So, how can we do something different? Well, I'd like to empower the patient instead of sending billions to the insurance company. And if we can put in programs that lower health care costs, we may still have premiums that are too high this year because, my gosh, we only got 2 months until the next plan year starts. But we're going to be able to substitute out these enhanced premiums with something which doesn't go to the insurance company but goes to you, the patient. And we're going to begin the process of aligning the incentives, for giving the patient the incentive to find the better deal, and that begins to lower cost. By the way, that means that we have to think differently. Now, let's try a new approach as opposed to just sending paper money to paper over the high health care costs and the resultant high premiums. Where does our health care, this is kind of my idea, Mr. President. Right now, we have the enhanced premium tax credit, which I've been speaking of. It goes to the insurance company. That should say 20 right there. It says 80. I'm just going to mark that out right now. I'm just going to, right now, Mr. President, give me just a second. I'm going to take this down. I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to go 20. But that 20 is the administrative cost and the profit that the insurance companies take out of every dollar you take them. I wish I had two marks a lot. My assistants get me a marks a lot. I need to have to do that. Oh, right there. No, because I had a misprint last night. I don't want it to be misprinted now. This should be 20. 20 of that $26 billion we're going to send them next year. 20% of the $26 billion goes to profit and it goes to administrative cost. Can we do it better? By golly, we can. Mr. President, here we go. I'm going to get this out of here. I'm just bugged the heck out of this. This should say 20. 20% of the $26 billion we send them next year would go to profit and administrative overhead. What if we give the patient the power? What if we say it goes to an account that she controls, that she can spend on her physician, her dental care, her prescriptions, on her eyeglasses. She can spend it on orthodontia. She can spend it on more things than this. And by the way, 100% of the $26 billion would go to the real care that that woman and her family needs. So we need to empower her, not give 20% of $26 billion to insurance companies. Nothing against insurance companies. God bless them, we need them. But if I have a choice of empowering you or empowering them, 100% to you or 20% to them, my vote's with you. And I think we as a Congress, no matter what your political party, should all vote the same way. I want to emphasize something here, by the way. This is pre-funded. People think about flexible spending accounts and they think, well, my gosh, this poor person, 120% of federal poverty, 150% of federal poverty, has to put their own money into this. No. We take the dollars that are in the enhanced premium tax credit and we put them there instead, and it's pre-funded. So, a little different than we normally think of flexible spending accounts, but it still works. Now, a couple things I've heard from my Democratic colleagues, by the way. My Democratic colleagues are concerned that whatever we pass over here will not get a vote in the House of Representatives. I'm pleased to say, yesterday, President Trump tweeted in favor of this proposal. I'm sure he would ask Mike Johnson to take it up. If Democrats want to vote on something that benefits the American people, and by the way, here's the tweet. You can't read this. It's classic President Trump. He's talking about money-sucking insurance companies. And then in all caps, he goes, be sent directly to the people so that they can purchase their own much better health care. That's the president's way of emphasizing, let's give power to the people, not send 20% of the money to the insurance companies. And as I said, with this tweet, the president indicating his support, I think we can rely upon him to ask Speaker Johnson to bring it up in the House of Representatives. So if Democrats want to vote on something that will have a vote in the House, they got it right there, the president's endorsement. I think this works all the way around. And let me say once more, after the president tweeted, I'm going to repeat, but it's important to repeat because this is a point of misunderstanding. After the president tweeted this, one of my Democratic colleagues said, wait, are you going to give all the money to this account for these people? And the answer is no. The baseline continues to go to buy the health insurance policy, but that enhanced premium tax credit is the sum that goes there. And I'm just going to say this once more. It is the enhanced premium tax credit that goes there. Now, the other thing I hear, this is way too complicated. No way, can't do it. Can't do it. Turns out, I have a flexible spending account. Over 70% of government employees in the United States of America have a flexible spending account as one of their offerings. Over 40% of those in the commercially insured market have a flexible spending account as one of their offerings. The state of Indiana has used something similar to this for their Medicaid population, and it's worked extremely well. This is not so complicated that federal employees, Medicaid recipients, you name it, 70% of our fellow Americans have the option of choosing this if they work for a government entity, and over 40% if they work for a business. So this is something which is already out there. And then I'm told, well, the federal government has to set it up. You know, I will point out that I am on an Obamacare policy through the Small Business Exchange. My FSA is already administered by the federal government through the Small Business Obamacare Exchange. All we're asking them to do is to open that window a little bit more and to take in the individual market Obamacare Exchange. We already have the existing mechanisms to do this within the federal government. This can be done. We should not consider it so complicated to accomplish. Now, inevitably, there's going to be some bureaucrat that says they need 6 months to open a window. And that's why I'm glad President Donald Trump is the president when this is coming up. Because if there's one guy that can cut through the bureaucratic, I'm a gastroenterologist and certain terms came to mind. And you're a farm state, maybe they do to you. But the one guy that can cut through the stuff that seems an obstacle to others, it's President Donald Trump. I always smile. Operation Warp Speed, they said it might take 18 months, maybe 10 years to get a vaccine to market, and President Trump's leadership led it to being in people's arms from before we started within 11 months. This man can make it happen. So I don't consider it too complicated for the patient to understand, and I don't consider it too complicated for the federal government to adapt to, which means we could even do it in 2026. Now, next thing I hear, is it going to cost money? It's going to cost money. And again, my Democratic colleagues should like this because the first year, it'll cost about the same as the enhanced premium tax credits. Because right now, we're 2 months from the beginning of the year, and there's not a whole lot of time for reforms to be put in place to lower the cost of health care. So for our fellow Americans who are dependent upon this, we can fix it for them. But now, we also have the opportunity to pass other reforms that truly will lower the cost of health care. So come 2027, these reforms, those reforms begin to work down the cost of health care, and we as Americans will benefit not just in the Obamacare exchanges, but in the commercial market, in the Medicare space, in other spaces as well. We begin to lower health care costs for all. That's more value for the individual, more value for the employer, more value for the taxpayer. So the choice is before us. We can continue to try and paper over the cost of health insurance by throwing billions more at it. Under the enhanced premium tax credit, the money goes to insurance companies and 20% gets hung up in administrative cost and profit. Or we can spend 100% of it in pre-funded flexible spending accounts benefiting patients and their families. What can it be used for? Under the enhanced premium tax credit, you're choosing to use it for insurance premiums and whatever the insurance company thinks you should get. Under the pre-funded flexible spending account, you decide. Or, since I'm looking at a Senator Kramer's wife decides, because wives, women make most of these decisions, and she'll decide to pay for dental, physician, glasses, prescriptions, or orthodontia, you name it, she gets to pick. Who makes the decision? Under the enhanced premium tax credit, insurance companies. Under the pre-funded flexible spending account, the patient does, the mother does, the wife does. These are the people that will then make the decisions. And does it lower cost? No. Under the enhanced premium tax credit, it drives premiums up. Under the pre-funded flexible spending account, we empower patients to shop, to find the best deal for their dollar. That drives competition, and that lowers cost. Mr. President, I cannot imagine why anybody would choose the status quo of enhanced premium tax credits versus giving the patient the power. we should give the patient the power. And I say this, and I want to be very clear here. I am not being partisan. I am being in good faith trying to say that everyone should put their party behind them, put their partisan politics behind them, and be focused only on how do we lower health care costs for the average American. No, for all Americans. How do we lower health care costs? That should be our focus. My staff asked if I'm wearing a purple tie because I'm bipartisan. I said, no, I'm wearing a purple tie because LSU lost badly last night and I thought we should encourage them. So this is my LSU Tiger tie. That said, just so it works out that I am really emphasizing this is something that we can work on together. President Trump's for it. And I'd like my Democratic colleagues to consider it. Not just reject it because a Republican proposes, but to actually realize it's in good faith trying to find a solution for the high health care costs that are hurting American families. Let's take a risk. Let's take a risk. Let's be bold. Let's do something different than we've done before. No, the same thing we've done before, but we've done it in a different space. We've done it on the small business Obamacare exchange. We've done it through our employer. We've done it through the Indiana Medicaid program. Let's try it in the individual exchange. Let's just trust that patient to make wise decisions for ourselves as opposed to treating them like something the federal government has to tell them what to do. I'll return where I started. As a doctor who took care of the uninsured for 20 years, I always found that my patients, even if they weren't really educated, but you explained the options to them, they made wise decisions. They made sophisticated decisions. When you gave them control of their health care and you allowed them to make that wise decision. Let's trust the American people, Mr. President. Let's give power to the patient, not billions to the insurance companies. And with that, I yield.
Senator from Louisiana.
Mr. President, I've been coming to the floor to speak about how can we go forward in a way which actually lowers lowers the cost of having health insurance for those who are on the exchanges and begin to build to a future where we lower the cost of health insurance and health care for everybody, whether you're on an Obamacare exchange or an employer-sponsored insurance or you name it. And so we know there's going to be a vote as part of this agreement to reopen the government on what to do about the exchanges. So we need to be thinking and talking about the solutions that are out there that benefit the American people. And of course, what the issue is underlying, people cannot afford their health insurance. They cannot afford their health care. Those are two different things, by the way. The cost of health care is what dictates, theoretically at least, the price of health insurance. If you lower the cost of health care, then you would lower the price of health insurance. I saw this as a physician practicing in a hospital for the uninsured for 20 years. I should say the uninsured and the poorly insured. There have been middle-income people who could not afford their insurance and or could not afford their health care. So how do we get out of it? Well, first, it's complicated. We've got to be creative, and we got to abandon set positions. Sometimes we're in this chamber, and all we do is stick to our guns, and if the other party suggests something, we automatically reject it. We've got to move beyond that, not as, oh my gosh, the other side proposes, I reject, but rather, wait a second, let's listen. Is there a solution here that can benefit the American people? Now, Obamacare tried to make, and has tried to make, health care affordable, health insurance affordable, by just throwing billions at it. And the problem with that doesn't make health care affordable. It just makes the health insurance premium less expensive for those who are on the exchanges. But this actually drives up the cost of insurance for some and does nothing about the underlying health care costs driving up the premiums for others. So what's my proposal? I would propose that we instead of paying